Today's lesson, we will be working on the midpoint of a line segment. At the beginning of the unit, we've talked about 5 things that we're going to talk about: line segments, distance, or also known as length of a line segment, midpoint, slope, domain, and range. So we covered off distance yesterday, so today let us begin our conversation about midpoint. The midpoint of a line segment is the point on the line segment that divides it into 2 equal parts. That is, it is the halfway point of the line segments. The coordinates of the midpoint are calculated by using the mean or average of the coordinates of the endpoint. So here, our midpoint here, and our midpoint is going to be equal to XA plus XB divided by 2, comma, YA plus YB divided by 2. So as you probably have, I would maybe choose to write it as such. My midpoint XM, YM, that is, my midpoint is going to be a coordinate on the plane. And how do I find it? Well, I simply employ this formula. What is this formula? This formula is the average of the x coordinates, if I ever can write this as an x, and average of the y coordinates. All right. So sometimes you can see this visually quite easily. Other times we're going to jump to the formula. So if I have endpoints 1, 2, and 7, 2, my line segment, if I have points 1, 2, and 7, 2, there we are. Now they're in the right spot. The midpoint, well, I'm going to draw my line segment. Here's my line segment as I have drawn it with a ruler. I'm hoping that it's quite intuitive that the midpoint will be right about here. So here is my midpoint, and I could just visually see that because from one end to is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So this is the exact middle of that line segment. Now, if I wish, what I could do is I could call this A and this B. So my coordinates for my midpoint would simply be, well, how do I get my x coordinate? Well, I'm just going to take XA plus XB divided by 2. Now, my y coordinate for my midpoint is going to be YA plus YB divided by 2. So my x midpoint is XA is 1, XB is 7. And if I divide that number by 2, my YA is 2, my YB is 2. And if I divide that by 2, remember to follow the order of operations. That is, we must calculate the numerator before dividing by 2. So for my coordinate, for my midpoint, it's just a little bit of mental math. 1 plus 7 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 2 plus 2, so done that. 2 plus 2 is 4. Divided by 2 is 2. So my midpoint, I could find it on the graph just by simply spotting out the midpoint, or I could use this more formula-based approach. So what we're going to do now is determine the length of the line segment. Now it's the length of the line segment with points -6, 5. So I'm just going to say -6, 5. There's my point. I'm just going to call this A. B will be this point. B is 5, negative 7. There we are. There's 5, negative 7. And now I lack a ruler here, so I'm just going to try my best. And there. Now notice this didn't ask for midpoint, it asked for length. So I know that XB, YB, I'm just going to pull those. So XA is equal to negative 6, YA is 5, XB is 5, YB is negative 7. So if I'm calculating the distance for this, or the length of it, I could say AB. Now, when I write AB with a bar over top, it's often referred to the length of AB. So it is XA minus XB squared plus YA minus YB squared. I would encourage you to take a look at the formulas and try to differentiate them. They do have differences. Paying very close attention to the formula and copying them down correctly might be a very tough task. I plug in my values. And then YA is 5 minus YB, well, is 5 minus negative 7. And I'm going to square that. I'm going to clean this up a bit. I'm hoping I'm cleaning this up. And what we get is I get negative 11 squared plus, now over here, so 5 minus negative 7, that turns that into a positive, so it's 12 squared. And unfortunately for me, I don't have my calculator in front of me. So, oh, here it is. I'm going to use my calculator. So negative 11 squared. Now the reason why I'm going to do this by hand is just to demonstrate that when we take a negative and we square it, it turns into a positive. So that's 121. 12 squared is 144. And what we get is the square root of 265. Now, if I take the square root of that number, it is going to be, the length of AB is going to be 16.2788, or if we round it to 3 decimal places, which often we do, it is going to be 16.279. All right, I hope that helps. Now, can I ask you a question since we've paid the price and done the question? What is the midpoint of this? Well, I don't know. Can I maybe say, oh, okay, I'm going to make a triangle out of this again. So the midpoint, I'm just going to say we're going to have to travel half the distance in the x. So I go from negative 6 to 5. So the midpoint, I think, is going to be right around here if I'm not mistaken. So sometimes it's not good to eyeball the midpoint. Now, if this is A and this is B, the midpoint, the distance will be the same. The distance from A to C will be the same as the distance B to C. All right, moving on. Good times. I'm going to do one more example and then we'll continue on with another video. Determine the midpoint of the line segment 9, negative 7 and negative 2, 11. First things first, I call one point A. Call another point B. I'm going to highlight midpoint because sometimes people throw in length like the previous question. Take a look at my formula sheet here. My midpoint xm, ym, and I'm going to put that as a point, is equal to xa plus xb divided by 2, comma, ya plus yb, divide that by 2. Now, depends on what your needs are. I think that it would be really good practice, for sure, to start with, is to simply identify ya, or xa, ya, xb, yb. So xa is going to be 9. Ya is negative 7. xb is negative 2. yb is 11. I think I'm almost there for midpoint. So now I'm just going to continue my work. So my midpoint, which is known as xm, ym, is going to be equal to xa plus xb divided by 2, comma, ya plus yb divided by 2. Now, my midpoint, xm, ym, and it's really important that you leave it expressed as a point. That is, that there's an x and a y, and it's in brackets. That's how you communicate it's a point. So I'm going to do mental math here. 9 plus negative 2 is 7. 7 divided by 2 is 7 over 2, comma. Negative 7 plus 11. Now I'm just going to try to refresh your mind here with integers. If I have negative 7 plus 11, it is much easier to swap places and just say, well, that's the equivalent to saying 11 minus 7. So negative 7 plus 11 is 4. Divided by 2 is 2. So my midpoint is 7 over 2, comma 2, or 3.5, comma 2. Now, it's odd that a math teacher would express it in such a weird form like negative or 7 over 2, comma 2, but get comfortable with fractions. Fractions are our friends, and the higher up you get in math, the more useful fractions are. And they're much easier to deal with, believe it or not, especially as the complexity of math increases.